The year was 1909. Winter came early that year to the Arkansas frontier, coating the world in a silence so deep it seemed to swallow sound itself. The pines bowed beneath the weight of snow, and every gust of wind sent whirls of white across the hills like restless spirits. On the far edge of Timber Hollow, where the land met the dark line of forest, stood a small log cabin. It was weathered and leaning slightly to one side, as though exhausted from standing so long against the cold. The locals avoided that stretch of land, for they said the place was cursed or haunted, depending on who told the tale. On certain nights, when the sky was dark and the valley winds died down, faint lights were seen glowing in the windows of that old Everett cabin, not the sharp yellow of fire, but a soft, warm light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The strangest part, those who had dared to look closely swore the candles gave no flame, they simply glowed. And in Timber Hollow, folks whispered that love or grief, perhaps both, still lived there. Samuel Wright had come to Timber Hollow to escape ghosts of his own. Once a schoolteacher in Little Rock, he had lived a simple, content life with his wife, Clara. She had been his world, gentle, bright-eyed, always humming while she worked. But the fever that swept through the city the previous spring had taken her swiftly, leaving Samuel hollow. He couldn't teach, couldn't sleep, couldn't walk down their old street without hearing her laugh. So when a letter arrived from the mountain settlement of Timber Hollow, offering a position at the one-room schoolhouse there, he accepted without hesitation. He arrived by wagon just as snow began to fall. Timber Hollow was a small community, 30 or so families, a church, a blacksmith shed, and an inn run by a kindly widow named Mrs. Alcott. That night over supper, Samuel asked her about the light he'd seen in the distance while arriving. "It looked like a cabin," he said, "but the glow, strange, like a lantern under water." Her spoon paused midair. "You saw the Everett cabin, sir. Best stay clear of it." When Samuel asked why, she leaned closer. "Because the candles there burn without flame, and when they do, it means the dead remember something the living forgot." Samuel didn't believe in ghost tales, but the pain in Mrs. Alcott's eyes made him wonder. His first week in Timber Hollow passed quietly. The children were polite, if wary of their new teacher. Samuel taught them arithmetic and reading, his voice steady but his heart still aching with Clara's memory. Each day ended early, for darkness came fast in the mountains. On the seventh evening, while walking home through the pines, Samuel noticed a faint glow in the distance. Soft, golden, and steady. He stopped. The snow muffled all sound. Only his own breathing filled the air. Something pulled at him, a strange mix of curiosity and comfort. He followed the light. Through the trees, half buried in snow, stood a small log cabin. Its chimney was broken, roof sagging, yet light glowed softly through the frosted glass. He approached carefully, breath fogging in the cold air. Inside, he saw candles flickering on a wooden table. But the flames, they were missing. The wicks glowed without fire, yet gave light enough to bathe the room in gold. Samuel froze. "Is someone there?" The forest answered with silence. He knocked. The sound echoed hollowly. The door creaked open on its own, revealing a room untouched by time. Dust covered the furniture, a child's toy lay in the corner, and an old Bible rested open on the table beneath the glowing candles. Samuel stepped inside. The air was neither cold nor warm. It felt suspended, like the pause between heartbeats. He examined one of the candles. The wax was unburned, yet it pulsed faintly, as if alive. Then he heard it. A woman's voice, soft, trembling, echoing from nowhere and everywhere. "Please, don't let them forget us." Samuel spun around, heart pounding. "Who's there?" But only the faint creak of the rocking chair by the hearth answered him. The chair moved once, then stopped. Samuel stumbled out into the snow, his lantern flickering wildly. Behind him, through the window, the unflamed candles still glowed. The next morning, Samuel went straight to Mrs. Alcott. "What happened to the Everetts?" he asked. Her face turned pale. "You didn't go there, did you?" "I did. And I heard—" She raised a trembling hand. "Don't speak of it here." She led him to the back of the inn where the fire crackled low. "10 winters ago," she said quietly, "John Everett built that cabin for his wife, Mary, and their daughter, Lucy. They were good people, helped everyone in this valley. Then the fever came, the same one that's taken so many. Samuel's heart clenched. They stayed isolated, hoping to protect others. But the sickness took them anyway. When the neighbors found them, they were holding hands by the hearth. The candles they'd lit days before still glowed. Not burned down, not melted, just glowing. Folks buried them by the creek, but that night, those same candles lit up again inside the cabin, and they've been seen every winter since." Samuel tried to reason. "Maybe some mineral, some—" Mrs. Alcott shook her head. "Maybe. Or maybe love just burns differently." Despite her warning, Samuel returned the following evening. The sky was clear, stars sharp against the black. The cabin's door was half open, as though waiting. Inside, the air felt charged with quiet energy. He walked to the old writing desk beneath the window, where dust lay thick except for a small, clean circle, as though someone had just placed a hand there. There, he found an envelope sealed with brittle wax. On the front, in faded handwriting, were the words, "For whoever still remembers." He opened it carefully. Inside was a letter, ink faint but legible. "If you find this home and its light still shining, please know that we are at peace. The light you see is not fire, but love that never left. Tell our story, so our little Lucy's laughter won't fade from the world. Mary Everett." Samuel sat in silence for a long time. The only sound was the faint hum of the glowing candles. He began exploring the rest of the cabin. In the corner near the hearth, under a layer of dust, he found a small wooden box painted with faded flowers. Inside were a few trinkets, a wooden horse, a ribbon, and several folded pieces of paper. He unfolded one carefully. It was a child's drawing, rough and bright. A house stood under a sun, 3 figures smiling beside it. Above the roof floated small yellow circles, candles perhaps. At the bottom, in the shaky hand of a child, were the words, "Mama says the candles will never go out if I'm brave." Samuel felt a lump in his throat. He gently refolded the paper, setting it back in the box. He realized this wasn't a haunted cabin. It was a love letter preserved in wood and wax. The next morning, Samuel stopped by the blacksmith's forge. Old Henry Dobbins, a man of few words, nodded as he worked. When Samuel mentioned the Everetts, the hammer paused mid-swing. "You're stirring ghosts," Henry muttered. "I'm trying to understand them," Samuel replied. Henry sighed, setting the hammer down. John Everett was stubborn, the good kind. When the fever came, folks told him to leave his wife and child, go stay with neighbors. But he said he'd rather die in their arms than live without them. And he did. He wiped his brow. "You see, some fires don't burn to destroy. They burn to remember." Samuel left the forge deep in thought. That night, he packed a few candles of his own, determined to spend one more evening in the cabin. Not to chase ghosts, but to listen. The wind howled through the pines as he climbed the ridge again. Snowflakes clung to his coat, glittering in the light of his lantern. When he reached the cabin, the glow was brighter, almost pulsing with life. He stepped inside, heart hammering. The air was warmer now, filled with a faint scent of lilac, Clara's favorite flower. "Mary Everett?" he called softly. "Lucy?" A soft humming answered him, distant, childlike, the tune uneven but sweet. It was a melody he recognized. Clara had hummed it often while mending his shirts. His eyes filled with tears. "Clara," he whispered. The humming stopped. The candles flared, not with flame, but with radiant light that filled every corner of the room. Samuel covered his eyes, overcome by the warmth that wasn't heat but emotion, love itself. When he lowered his hand, the light began to form shapes. Within the glow, the faint figure of a little girl appeared, her outline soft, her smile radiant. She held a small candle of her own, though it too burned without flame. Her lips moved soundlessly, but Samuel somehow understood the words. "Please, don't forget the warmth." Then, just as gently, she faded. Samuel stood frozen. The candles dimmed once more, leaving the cabin in peaceful silence. But on the wall near the hearth, something caught his eye, scratched faintly into the wood. "Flame is not what burns, sir. Love is." He touched the carved words with trembling fingers, and for the first time since Clara's death, Samuel smiled. Back in his small rented room above the Timber Hollow Inn, Samuel couldn't rest. The faint humming, the little girl's smile, the carved message, it all echoed in his mind. He sat by the window watching the storm pass, snow swirling under the moonlight. On the table before him was a single candle. It was Clara's. He had carried it with him since she passed. It had never been lit. He remembered her laughter when she'd given it to him on their first Christmas together. "So you'll never sit in the dark," she had said. He lit a match, but before the flame could touch the wick, he hesitated. Instead, he whispered softly, "If love can burn without fire, show me." He blew out the match. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, impossibly, the wick began to glow on its own, soft, golden, and alive. Tears welled in his eyes. The warmth wasn't from heat, but from memory. The same warmth he'd felt when Clara's hand was in his. Samuel realized then that the Everett's miracle wasn't theirs alone. It was love itself, alive in every heart that refused to let go. That night, Samuel dreamed. He stood once more in the Everett cabin, though it was no longer in ruin. The walls gleamed, the hearth burned bright, and laughter filled the room. At the table sat Mary and John Everett, smiling kindly. Between them was little Lucy, her candle glowing gently beside her. "Mr. Wright," she said, her voice clear and sweet, "you heard us." He nodded. "Why me?" "Because your light was fading," Mary said softly. "But love isn't meant to fade. It changes form. It finds another heart to keep it burning." Lucy reached out, holding her candle toward him. "Tell them. Tell everyone that warmth doesn't end when we do." When Samuel awoke, his face was wet with tears. The candle beside him still glowed gently, filling his small room with soft golden light. The next morning, Samuel gathered his students inside the one-room schoolhouse. The storm had passed, and the children arrived bundled in scarves and mittens. He stood before them, his voice quieter than usual. "Today, I want to tell you a story. Not from a book, but from a cabin in the woods." He told them about the Everetts, their kindness, their courage, their love that burned so deeply it could not be extinguished by death. He described the candles that glowed without fire and the lesson they carried, that love, once lit, never truly goes out. The children listened in awed silence. When he finished, one small girl raised her hand. "Mr. Wright," she asked softly, "my papa's in heaven. Mama says he still watches over us. Is that his light too?" Samuel knelt beside her. "Yes," he said. "Sometimes you can't see the flame. But that doesn't mean it's gone. It's still there, inside you. That day, Timber Hollow's children went home speaking not of arithmetic or spelling, but of candles that glowed from love. As winter deepened, word spread through the valley. Farmers, trappers, and mothers carrying infants began to visit the old Everett cabin. At first, they came out of curiosity, but when they stepped inside and felt the gentle warmth, many wept openly. One by one, they left candles of their own, some lit, some not, on the Everett's old table. And as the sun set, something extraordinary happened. The moment the first stars appeared, the visitors' candles began to glow, not with ordinary flame, but with that same quiet golden light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. No one spoke. They simply stood together in reverent silence. The cabin glowed brighter than it ever had. From that day forward, Timber Hollow began a new tradition. Each winter, the townsfolk would bring candles to the cabin, not for the dead, but for the love they refused to forget. 10 years passed. Timber Hollow grew, though it remained humble. Samuel had grown older, his hair silvering, but his heart was full. One spring morning, a stranger arrived, a traveling historian named Dr. Elias Morton. He had heard whispers of candles that burn without flame and wanted to see the phenomenon for himself. Samuel led him up the winding trail to the cabin. It was well cared for now, the roof repaired by townsfolk, flowers planted near the door. Inside, the historian lit his lantern, but it sputtered and went out, and yet the room filled with gentle light from dozens of unflamed candles. Morton gasped. "There must be phosphorus or some reaction." Samuel only smiled. "Or something that science can't measure," he said quietly. "Some things burn brighter when they're not fire at all." The historian wrote furiously in his notebook. But when he left Timber Hollow, he told no one of formulas or proof, only that he had seen love itself, glowing softly in the snow. That night, as Samuel sat by his desk, he felt a strange peace he hadn't known in years. He took out his old writing paper and began to write, not to anyone alive, but to the one he still loved most. "My dearest Clara, I once believed love ended when the body does. I feared forgetting you and being forgotten. But here, in this quiet valley, I've learned something sacred. Love is not a flame that consumes. It is a light that endures. It passes from heart to heart, keeping us warm through the coldest nights. If ever you can see me, know that I still carry your glow, and I will until my breath fades." He folded the letter, sealed it, and placed it on the Everett table beside the other candles. That night, the glow inside the cabin seemed to shimmer gently, as though touched by gratitude. Time, as it does, moved on. Samuel grew old. His hands trembled when he wrote, his steps slower when he climbed the ridge, but every winter he still brought a candle to the Everett cabin. One quiet spring evening, he felt his chest tighten as he sat by the window. His breath came shallow. He looked at Clara's candle, still glowing softly on the nightstand. "Clara," he whispered, smiling faintly, "I'm coming home." When the innkeeper found him the next morning, Samuel was at peace, eyes closed, a faint smile on his lips. The candle beside him still glowed brightly, without flame. That same night, the people of Timber Hollow swore the Everett cabin shone brighter than ever before. The glow could be seen from miles away, pulsing softly like a heart, until dawn, when it slowly faded into gentle light. Years passed. Timber Hollow changed. The mine closed, families moved away, and the schoolhouse fell quiet. Eventually, the town itself became a whisper on old maps. One summer afternoon, a boy wandering through the woods stumbled upon the old Everett cabin. The door hung open, and sunlight streamed through broken boards. He stepped inside, expecting cobwebs and dust, and found instead a single folded paper resting on the table. It was yellowed but untouched by time. The boy opened it and read Samuel's letter to Clara. The words moved him deeply, though he didn't fully understand them. He carried it home to his mother. That night she read it aloud to their family. The next morning she placed a candle by their window, unlit, and somehow that evening she swore it glowed faintly, just for a moment. The story of the Everett cabin was alive again. Generations later, people still spoke of Timber Hollow's legend. Travelers passing through Arkansas would sometimes stop and ask about the place where candles burn without flame. Those who found the path to the ruined cabin said it still held a strange warmth. They'd leave small candles or notes, letters to lost loved ones, prayers for peace, words of forgiveness. And sometimes, on clear nights, a faint light would shimmer through the cracks of the old logs. It wasn't fire, and it wasn't illusion. It was something else, something unseen, alive in every heart that had ever loved and refused to forget. The story became more than a ghost tale. It became a quiet sermon passed through generations. Flame is not what burns. Love is. Over a century later, hikers exploring the Ozark backcountry came across the remnants of a cabin half buried in moss. They didn't know its name, nor the town that once surrounded it. While sifting through the debris, one of them, Eleanor, a young woman who had recently lost her father, found an old brass candle holder in the ashes. It was blackened with age, yet warm to the touch. She held it gently, puzzled. As dusk fell, she thought she saw a faint shimmer deep within the wax. No flame, just light. Her eyes filled with tears and she whispered, "Love doesn't end. It just changes form." Her companions laughed softly, thinking she was talking to herself. But Eleanor smiled, feeling warmth spread through her palms and into her chest. That night, she placed the candle holder on her bedside table. Before she fell asleep, she saw it glow faintly again. And somewhere in the silent hills of Arkansas, beneath the same stars that once watched over the Everetts, a quiet light flickered across the snow, burning not with flame, but with love that had never truly gone out.